Hello people, my name is Vikas Sharma and I welcome you all on behalf of Exponent to Success to this wonderful video on quadratic equations. In the previous videos we have learned about linear equations, and this is the best time to move forward and go on to quadratic equations. And I hope that you have heard of quadratic equations before, but even if you have not, you have come to exactly the right place, because this is where we start from the very basics of quadratic equations. So jumping straight onto the video, let me tell you the simplest of the quadratic equations that we have seen, or we probably will see, is x square is equal to 0. Now uh, uh, we remember some linear equations also, like for example x minus 5 is equal to 0. That's a linear equation, and x square is equal to 0 is a quadratic equation. Now what is the difference between the two equations that you see? Yes, you guessed it right, because here we see that in a linear equation the power of x, or the power of the variable, is 1, while in a quadratic equation the power of a variable is 2. So any equation where the variable's power is 2, or an equation which is of the order 2, that's how we write it. I'll write it down for you. Any equation of order 2 is called a quadratic equation. So that's what a quadratic equation actually is. Now a quadratic equation could be written down in various ways. For example, x square is equal to 0 is one way of writing a quadratic equation. Then there could be some modifications also, that a number could be added or subtracted to it. For example, x square minus 4 is equal to 0. That's a quadratic equation. Or it could be x square plus 3 is equal to 0, or x square minus 1 is equal to 0, or 2x square plus 3 is equal to 0. So these are all examples of quadratic equations. Now other kind of quadratic equations are where there may be a variable of x also. So for example, x square plus 5x plus 6 is equal to 0, or x square plus x minus 6 is equal to 0. So these are also examples of quadratic equations. Now just to make it a little colorful, I am changing the color of the pen. So it could be x square say minus 3x plus 15 is equal to 0, or 3x square minus 5x plus 21 is equal to 0. So all these are examples of quadratic equations, and quadratic equations are anything which has where the highest power of the variable is 2. Like in all of these you see that the power of the variable x in all these cases is 2, the highest power. I mean something like this, that x minus 3 times x plus 2 is equal to 0. Is that a quadratic equation, or is that a linear equation? Because here you see that the power of the variable x is 1 in this case also, and here also it is 1. So obviously this has got to be a linear equation. Now let me tell you why. Because this is a kind of equation which can be simplified into a quadratic equation. So what we actually do is we have to multiply this by this. So when we multiply x by x, we get x square. Then we multiply x by 2, so we get plus 2x. Then we multiply the negative 3 by x, so we get minus 3x. And then we multiply the negative 3 by 2, so we get minus 6 is equal to 0. And when we simplify it further, we get x square minus x minus 6 is equal to 0. So that's a quadratic equation as we see. So here x minus 3 into x plus 2 is equal to 0. When simplified further, it gives us a quadratic equation. Therefore, this equation that we had here, x minus 3 into x plus 2 is equal to 0, that actually is an example of a quadratic equation and not a linear equation. Equation is written as, ax square plus bx plus c is equal to 0. So that's the standard form of a quadratic equation. So now instead of x square, it could be any variable. It could be m square or n square, it could be p square or q square, or it could be s square or k square. Whatever the variable is, it doesn't matter. It has to be with the power of 2. And a is the coefficient of x square, so it could be 1, it could be 2, it could be 3, it could be negative 1, it could be negative 2. So any negative integer or positive integer is possible, but the only thing is that a cannot be equal to 0. Why is this? Because a cannot be equal to 0, because if it is 0, then it will no longer be in quadratic equation, because x square multiplied by 0 will become 0, and what we are left with is a linear equation. So a cannot be 0, others can be 0, so it does not matter. B is the coefficient of x. It could be a positive integer, it could be a negative integer, or it could be 0. C again is a constant. It is not attached to any variable, so it could be a positive integer or a negative integer or even a fraction. It does not matter what it is, but whatever it is, this is the standard form of a quadratic equations. Now looking at some quadratic equations, for example, x square plus 5x minus 6 is equal to 0. Let us take some values of a, b and c in each case. In fact, what I'll do is I'll come back with a lot of equations written, and then we'll work out what the values of a, b and c in each case are. Okay, so I'm back with a lot of equations, and what we can see from each of these equations that there are different values of a, b and c. What our purpose is to find out what the value of a is, what the value of b is, and what the value of c is. So in the first equation, if we see the coefficient of x square is 1, so the value of a is 1. The coefficient of x is plus 5, so the value of b is 5, and the constant is negative 6. We have to include the signs here, so the sign is very important, so it has to be negative 6. In the second equation, again the coefficient of x square is 1, the coefficient of x is negative 7, and the constant is 24. And in the third equation, we have the coefficient of x square, the value of a would be 2, the coefficient of x, which is b, is negative 12, and the constant is 25. In the fourth equation, we see that there are some fractions introduced, and here we also see that a, which is the coefficient of x square, is carrying a negative value, so the value of a is negative 3, the value of b is 4 over 3, and the value of c is 16 over 9. Then next equation, we see that the value of x square, the coefficient of x square is 5, the coefficient of fx, or the value of b, is negative 12, and the constant is negative 16. And in the last equation, we see that the coefficient of x square, or a in this case, would be 3, the coefficient of x would be minus 15, and the constant c would be 56. So these are some examples of quadratic equation, friends, and they are very simple to understand. So as I said, there are some equations which can be converted into quadratic equations if they are simplified further. So we'll learn more about quadratic equations in the coming videos. Till then, hang in there, and Also, one more thing before I end is that if you really like this video, you must subscribe to the channel, because any new videos that we put in here, they would come right into your mailbox when if you subscribe to the channel. So that's a must. And if you're learning something useful out of these videos, please share it with your friends and tell them to subscribe to the channel too. And I won't mind if you put in your personal comments, and maybe even if you're facing some problems in school, or if you want to ask me something to do related to quadratic equations, or for any topic for that matter. Whatever your doubt is, please come up with it in the comment section, and I will make sure that I'll make a video on it. So please like, share and subscribe to the video, and good luck, study hard, God bless you.